Let's explore meditation's lessons for times of political turmoil. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. The question begins with the title. The question is titled, "How do fellow Buddhists navigate our current American political climate?" So this is a very long and dense question, and rather than reading the whole thing and then answering it, I'm going to answer it as we go through. It begins, to say our current political climate is a joke would be an offense to jokes everywhere. True that. When valuing empathy, kindness, inclusivity, and objective truth, what are we to do in this current state of politics? Excellent question. Do we pick candidates we do not morally agree with simply because they are the lesser evil? Let's start right there. That is an excellent question. I recently turned 59, and for someone who has the disabilities that I do, that makes me super lucky. I've been voting since I was 18. And I have squandered my life voting for the lesser of two evils. And what I have seen since I was born in the 60s, the 1960s, is this. The new left is the old right. And the old right, and so the new right is the old wackadoodles. There is a fear that fascism could come to America, but here's the truth, it's already here. It's been here a long time. I love the myth that my country was founded by scrappy idealists, but it wasn't. It was founded by the 1700s version of tech bros who didn't want to pay their taxes. Tech bros who felt that only other white, male, wealthy tech bros should vote and everybody else should shut up and do as they're told. I'm reminded of the back in the 80s, the hotel millionaires who said taxes are for little people. So we have had elitism and fascism from the get-go. It is baked into America's cake. America built on the backs of women and slaves and indigenous Americans ground to a pulp within the gears and the cogs of colonialism. Colonialism that has never stopped in America. Even after we stretched from sea to shining sea, we spread our colonialism up to Africa and down to Tierra del Fuego and all points in between. We spread our colonialism to the east and to the west in the name of protecting capitalism, as if it needed protecting. Colonialism is jingoism. And jingoism is just fascism turned outward. I was raised to be Republican. I had my first political awakening in the early 90s and I became a Democrat. I had my second political awakening during the re-election campaign of Obama when I was first introduced to Bernie Sanders and to the Zeitgeist movement. And the question has been asked. Why did Biden throw away his political advantage during his first term in office when he had a majority of Democrats in the Senate and a majority of Democrats in the House? And the answer is the same reason Obama did. Why is that? Because the talking points of the contemporary Democratic Party are just that. Pressure points with which they use in hopes of manipulating the electorate the way an equestrian uses a bit and a bridle and a reins to guide his beast of burden. It has been said by those more clever than myself that infinite power corrupts infinitely. And of course, this has been explored through science fiction. I'm looking at you, Star Trek: The Next Generation. But it is the truism. I've seen progressives become corrupted and jaded and make compromises in the name of staying in power and postpone and think politically and think strategically instead of thinking idealistically, instead of thinking from love. Both Obama and Biden could have set in motion the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. They could have made the right abortion and a woman's right to choose federal law. They squandered that opportunity that they might use it as a political pawn. There are people who would tell us, be careful lest the Handmaid's Tale be realized. But it has already been realized. Both parties in America are fascist. One is just more subtle about it. One is more polite about it. But it is still fascist. In the second Matrix movie, I think it was Matrix Reloaded. Is that it? The Merovingian said, and of course I'm going to paraphrase dreadfully, that a false choice is offered by those with power to those without power to make them think they have power when they don't. In the movie Copycat, the villain says, I don't know, should I shoot you or should I stick you? Should I stick you or should I shoot you? Well, that's what we call a false choice. I would prefer not to be shot or stuck, thank you very much. So what happens is someone with power will gaslight someone without power into thinking that they have a choice when they don't. They have to choose between the lesser of two evils, and then they are content to blame the person who made the false choice when the choice was merely an illusion to begin with. We have two parties who have already declared war on women, who have already declared war on people who aren't white, who have already declared war on people who aren't wealthy, who have already declared war on people who aren't optimally healthy, who have already declared war on people who are not Christian. We have both parties who have already declared war on the homeless that are homeless because of failed policies. So they make people homeless and they punish people for being homeless. with legalized slavery. In our Constitution, there is a clause that says if you are arrested, if you are in prison, you get to be a slave. It's horrific. It should not be there, but it is. There was a time back in the early 90s when the League of Women Voters ran our elections. A third-party candidate, two actually, almost stole the show. And so the two most powerful parties incorporated and formed laws so that they ran the show. And since then, we've formally had a two-party duopoly. As long as there is an electoral college, and as long as there is an absence of ranked choice voting, we will be stuck. But you didn't ask for the opinion of an aging Jewish man. You asked for the spiritual perspective, and here it is. There is great wisdom to be found in the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. This wisdom is universal, is not unique to Taoism, and it is mirrored in Buddhism. In Buddhist lore, we are told that the Buddha's foolish cousin was named Devadatta, who thought it would be splendid to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel, whereas Gautama felt it would be far better to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Regardless of which side of the aisle you think you're on, the moment you've chosen to be rigid, you've lost. The moment you've chosen to be controlled by fear, you've played into their game. The moment you choose to throw out logic and be superstitious, you've lost. The moment you choose to indulge, we choose to indulge our controlling tendencies, we've lost. Both parties rail against the Constitution. Both parties rail against the Bill of Rights. Both parties rail against the First Amendment, the right to assemble, the right to political protest. Both parties. The once we've chosen to be elitist, to have an in-group and out-group mentality, we've lost. The moment we've chosen to communicate cryptically and to communicate in blurbs and memes and vagaries, we've lost. The moment we choose to be competitive and believe the lie of a zero-sum game where I can only win if you lose and you can only win if I lose, we've lost. The moment we've chosen that cruelty is a valid ends to a means, or means to an ends, we've guaranteed internal fascism and external jingoism. There was a time in human history where we could afford the luxury of war. That time has passed. Forget the fact we have thermonuclear devices. We are on the precipice of so influencing the biosphere of the sphere of this planet to make it uninhabitable for human civilization. Now, that's great if you're into post-apocalyptic literature, but it's far easier to watch a post-apocalyptic movie or read a post-apocalyptic book than have no place to poop or drink clean water. No, regardless of who or what we believe in, whether we are secular or spiritual, whether we are Christian or Jewish or Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist, our only hope as a species is for as many humans as possible to be utterly defined by being flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. Kindness is the ultimate subversion. Let's look at history. Let's look at Western history. Christianity began as a Jewish cult, which was tolerated by the enormous Roman Empire. The empire eventually fell, and when it fell as an object of pseudo-intellectual debate, it fell. But Judaism persisted, and so did Christianity. And so did Islam, which grew up, arguably, once again, depending upon which historians you speak of, in the shadow of the Roman Empire when it was in decline. In those three numerically significant world religions, you can find imams and ministers and rabbis who sing the praises of love. There are parts of Los Angeles which are older than other parts, and one of those areas I've seen the slabs of sidewalk lifted 18 inches by the roots of trees which have grown slowly and subtly and relentlessly. And just as, well, just like Blue Oyster Cult sang over and over again and again, nature points out the folly of man, just as plants can subvert the concrete efforts of humanity, we puny humans, puny individuals that are armed only with love and peace, can subvert the cruel machinations of those who only love power, prestige, fame, and wealth. Let's continue now that I've shared with you the overview. Let's continue with the original set of questions. Do we not participate in voting at all? There are many who would love that. There are many who want you to stop voting. There is a very popular person, I'm not going to mention his name. He was a very eloquent and funny person. Some would say he was handsome. And he kept saying, you know, if they wanted you to vote, they got to give you better choices. If they won't give you better choices, don't vote. That'll show them. Dude, that's their agenda all the while. They don't want us to vote. So let us not fall into the hands of those who treat democracy as an illusion, as theater. Do we have a responsibility to inform ourselves of the true intentions and values of current candidates and making a decision off of the information we find? Yes, we do. And here's the cool thing. We don't have to be detectives. We don't have to be Lieutenant Columbo. If you're an old guy, you know who that was. We don't have to be Miss Marple or Hercule Poirot. People cannot wait to show us who they are. Whether it's the Gish Gallop of former President Trump, who not only lies, but tells so many lies that as to contradict each other in the span of a single sentence, or it is the Hillary Clinton-esque foibles of Kamala Harris, who recently restated that she continues to feel that Hamas are terrorists, and that Americans who demonstrate against Netanyahu are anti-Semitic, regardless of whether they're Jewish, regardless of whether they're rabbis, regardless of whether they know more about the Torah, the Talmud, and the Midrash than she will ever know. So, yeah, both are so-called choices. Have showed us who they are. We don't have to be psychics. We don't have to be great detectives. We just listen. Cops tell us, detectives tell us that if the person they are interrogating just speaks long enough, they'll tell you everything you need to know. Let's continue. And if so, how do we go about finding what they really say and stand for, with almost the majority of information online being blatant propaganda and straight up false? And as I mentioned, they will reveal who they are. Kamala had a great advantage, and she blew it by just being, she couldn't help herself, but by emulating certain of the flaws strategically of Hillary Clinton, and by railing against those who would exercise the First Amendment rights, and by ignoring international law that says that occupied people have a right to resist their oppressors, and that the oppressors do not have a right of self-defense if they are invading a foreign land. People cannot wait to show you what they are. Bullets have left guns with slower velocities than the rate at which people cannot help but vomit forth their truth, like Linda Blair in The Exorcist. Putting my racing mind behind, which is quite the trick, I was just wondering in general how this sub-navigates our political climate, if at all, as well as some specific questions similar to those spouted off above. Well, I think I've done a good job of answering that thus far. Now, I can't say how other people, I'm just saying how I can only tell you my perspective of things at this moment, based literally on a lifetime of spiritual study and meditative and contemplative practice. I am far from perfect. I am deeply enthusiastic and sincere, and this is where I'm at right now. Am I correct in saying Buddhism recommends participating in your democratic process if you're a part of it, regardless of how you feel about it? That is an excellent question. So Buddhism has more generalities than specifics. So let's talk generalities. The Buddha, so whether the Buddha was real or archetypical, every sect of Buddhism agrees that first the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, and then he taught the Eightfold Path sequentially. They don't contradict each other. In fact, one introduces the second. 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path pertains to loving kindness, and that loving kindness is explored in terms of the four bases of mindfulness: the intellectual, the interpersonal, the physical, and the circumstantial. So the idea is this: if we practice active concentration and active contemplation, we will forever be fighting against our amygdala to present even an analog of empathy. However, if we've been taught, we've had the very good fortune to be taught how to practice mindfulness and meditation, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, by relying upon our autonomic nervous system, then the mindfulness and meditation will act as the engine that drives our empathy. and that empathy will be spontaneous and uncontrived. Therefore, we don't have to figure out and plot how to be empathetic. We cannot help but be empathetic. Just as someone exposed to an allergen cannot help but sneeze or cough. Likewise, one who is successfully and effectively trained in mindfulness and meditation cannot help but respond empathetically to the needs of others, whether we perceive those needs consciously or merely viscerally. Our empathetic response to it becomes an inevitability, to quote our friend Agent Smith from the first Matrix movie. So, to use whatever non-violent means we have at our disposal is crucial. If we live in a country that at least gives lip service to voting, then vote. And if they give you a series of false choices, then make the choices that are the most compassionate and loving you can. Remember, our greatest wisdom comes not from active analysis, but from the centered spontaneity. When love's centered spontaneity is applied to our choices, utterances, and deeds, it is known as the effortless effort of Wu Wei, if you're a Taoist, or the sixth fold of the Buddha's eightfold path, if you fancy yourself a Buddhist. How are we to find unbiased, objective news about candidates and political issues for someone that doesn't really know much about them? I'd imagine Trump, Kamala, RFK for Dummies type articles would be very biased, if not from the candidate themselves. And even then. So once again, people cannot help but show you who they are. Once again, I'm a big sci-fi geek. That's inferred by the name of this channel, Meditate Like a Jedi. And I'm pan-geekule, so I do love Star Wars, but I love other forms of sci-fi as well, including Star Trek, the original series, including Star Trek. When watching the original series, I think it was called Mirror Mirror, was the first time they had an alternate universe episode. And there was good Spock and bad Spock. And you could tell the difference between bad Spock had a goatee. And the series follows the members of the Star Trek crew from our universe trying to survive the alternate universe while pretending to be evil. Meanwhile, their counterparts who found themselves in our universe were promptly arrested and put in the brig. When questioned, good Spock explained, it is far easier for the good to pretend to be evil than for the evil to pretend to be good. And of course, I'm once again paraphrasing because that's my shtick. But the point is, I've said all that to say this. We can't hide what we are. Abraham Lincoln is said to have said, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all of the time. We cannot hide what we are. We can pretend as much as we want that we are flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. But we cannot hide the degree to which we are controlled by our rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel tendencies. Now, we all have these tendencies in potentiality. The question is to what degree we are controlled by those tendencies. And anybody who's ever been in a romantic relationship knows that if you really love this person and you really respect them and you really want them to love you back, or at least be infatuated with you back, you're going to put your best foot forward. I mean, on your first date, you're probably not going to reach across the table and ask them to pull your finger, if you know what I mean. But eventually, despite the best of intentions, the more time you spend with your would-be partner, the more who you are, your strengths and your weaknesses will become abundantly clear. And what is true romantically is also true socially and and vocationally and politically. We cannot hide what we are. I'm not terribly butch, but I'm told by those who are that Vince Lombardi once said, "Fear makes cowards of us all." The more time you spend with someone, the more they can't help but show you their weaknesses and their agenda. And in this world where everybody has a microphone and a camera, it becomes an inevitability. For instance, I was very, very, very hopeful with Kamala, and I didn't have to second guess her. I just had to wait long enough for her to publicly and proudly share her worldview. Same thing with Trump, who is this mysterious, tall, blonde guy who wrote... who was a real estate mogul from the 80s. Wait long enough, and he gets on TV and starts quoting from Mein Kampf and shows us what he's really about. What he's about. People will show us. They can't help it. Let's continue. How do I navigate those dear to me that are very emotionally involved in politics, let alone from propaganda and misinformation? I recently had a partner with no prior behaviors like this in politics shockingly start praising ex-candidate. Meanwhile, saying very stereotypical, obviously untrue, and very negative, almost conspiracy theory level talking points. I ended up getting frustrated and handled the situation immaturely by trying to have a research-based debate, which just led to them thinking I was defending and fighting for the other side, and ended up excusing myself and leaving because I was getting frustrated with a lack of argumentative analysis and an abundance of blatant fallacies that I didn't want to point out just to keep the peace. So this is very important. Having a partner, having a romantic partner, is more than just having someone to go and see a movie with. It's more than just having someone to make love with. Having a romantic companion is having a partner. Someone to count on when the chips are down. And it's okay to disagree on which movie is funnier, or what's the most delicious way to prepare a vegetable. Those things seldom result in your partner trying to smother you in your sleep with a pillow. But when your partner reveals what they are, if your partner reveals that they have no grasp of critical thinking. That is a red flag. If your partner does not possess the ability to communicate with you as an adult, not as a large child with a car and a driver's license, but as someone who has the maturity to recognize what they feel and yet choose to be kind, to recognize what they feel and choose to be rational, to recognize what they feel and recognize to be vulnerable and say, at this moment I feel very agitated and unable to communicate clearly. Even to admit that as a victory, if you're with someone who isn't there, those are red flags, regardless of the finer points. You're not going to agree with your partner about everything. The question is not if you disagree, but how you disagree. Can you disagree agreeably? Can you disagree respectfully? Can you disagree kindly? Can you disagree rationally? If you cannot, they might not be the best partner for you, regardless of who they vote for. Once again, as a kid in the 70s, I remember watching an episode of Barney Miller where a guy chained his wife up to the sink so she couldn't go out to vote because she was determined to vote the opposite he did in an effort to cancel out his vote so that he wouldn't matter. Now that was very dark. It's okay if people disagree with you. But if there's a malicious intent, that is a red flag. I remember one time I was dating this one individual and we were at the market. And this is before I was vegan. And we were looking at fish. And I said, oh, you want to stay away from the farmed fish? I heard several reports that the conditions in which the farmed fish are raised is pretty much like they're swimming in their own toilet. And this individual responded with the utmost insincerity and with doe eyes, oh, our government would never permit such a thing. For me, that was a red flag moment. That was just a real red flag moment. And so the question is not how pretty is your partner or how handsome is your partner or how funny is your partner, but is this person the person you want to go through life who's going to help you to be the person that you want to be? Or are they going to be a thorn in your side? I don't want to have to do this. I want to be able to hear my partner's view. I want to be able to hear my partner's views out. But they are so ridiculous. I don't know how to do it seriously. So those who are more skilled at rhetoric than I have noticed that the most effective method is to use the psychoanalytic technique of just holding space and letting someone talk and sincerely being empathetic and sincerely being curious and asking them questions not so that defend their assumptions, but just so that you sincerely learn what they feel and what led them to feel that way, and sincerely wish to learn what they think and what led them to think that way. Creating an environment where someone does not feel the need to defend themselves creates the opportunity, if not consciously, then subconsciously, perhaps even viscerally, to re-examine their beliefs. But they cannot do it if we are actively trying to challenge them. Doing so is difficult and either requires that we be a consummate liar, which I do not recommend, or that we have a really solid practice of mindfulness and meditation that helps us to notice what we feel and process what we feel within the span of a breath or two while listening to their thoughts and feelings. When it is beyond political involvement and is blatant basis to an extreme level, especially with someone so close, how do I bring this up without an argument? I'm not really a fan of having my partner believe in such crazy stuff and just keep quiet about it. So this is a very important subject I'd like to explore real quick. So let's run through this whole thing rapidly. Let's look through mindfulness and meditation through the lens of neuroscience. As I've mentioned, the prefrontal cortex is a wonderful tool, but like any tool, it can be overused. If we overuse our prefrontal cortex, it's going to light up our amygdala and increase our aggression and anxiety. That's just the way we're wired. If we've been told that mindfulness is active concentration and meditation is active analysis, and we rely upon such structures as our medial prefrontal cortex or our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, we're going to further exhaust our prefrontal cortex and further light up our amygdala. Eventually, if we continue with this abuse, causing our body to present symptoms of depression. Nobody wants this. But here's some good news. When it comes to every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access our sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the middle third of our spinal cord, which has evolved to help us perceive and to do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. Now, perceiving sight, sensations, flavors, sense, and the like, perceiving emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings can feel overwhelming. Fortunately, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system ensconced within the bottom third and the upper third of that same spinal cord, which has evolved to help us both physically relax and consequently mentally release. This is the dynamo that drives the remaining 6 folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. This is the dynamo that drives 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, which pertains to loving kindness, which is why the greatest Dzogchen Lamas of Tibet have insisted that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. What has all that to do with your problematic discussions with your partner? Simply this. There is much to learn from this bit of archetypical art. Consider the gal. So let's pretend there are 2 extremes in a happy medium. One extreme is being completely contrived. I do not recommend that. The other extreme is being surrendering to scattered spontaneity. That's like that really good idea you get after your 3rd espresso consumed within 15 minutes. Ooh, you'll be enthusiastic, but not terribly grounded in reality. While you're so hyper-caffeinated, you begin to feel as if you're gazing through walls. So the midpoint between these 2 extremes is not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity, illustrated by this archetype, wherein this gal, the color of a cumulus cloud, appears to be actively sporting a tantric union, while her partner, the color of the azure sky, is passively savoring the same tantric union, demonstrating the union of centered spontaneity. When our choices and our utterances and deeds flow in the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, then we will spontaneously say the right thing in the right way at the right time. It'll just tumble out of our mouths. And the right behavior will just flow through our body. This is the fringe benefit of an effective practice of mindfulness and meditation. Vote from centered spontaneity. Converse from centered spontaneity. Flow interpersonally from centered spontaneity. And your life could grow, could begin to smack of the bliss inferred by Buddha's real or imagined paradise found or depicted in religious art. Life is not always going to be perfect, but it's going to be so much better the more we reap the fruits of a dynamical practice of mindfulness and meditation. I have blathered on for quite a while, and I would like very much to contemplate and meditate with you. And I would look forward to doing that after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I've spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So I'd like it very much if our opening chants and contemplations flowed from the latest iteration of Heart Essence Easy Meditation. There's going to be some editing involved. That's inconvenient, but sadly par for the course. Let's begin by reviewing the mantra's meaning. Om, I invoke the wish of healing Mani Jewel that serves as a metaphor of love, and the Pemi Lotus of purity serving as a metaphor of release, with whom I supplicate may love and release be mastered by all. So, one moment, it's time for a bit of the old editing. Come on, machine, don't be that way. All right, almost there. Bear with me. All right, here we go. I feel like the Joker whenever I say that. Okay, so I'm going to hit cut and going back to home. And I'm going to hit paste. So let us bring the experience of the four bases of mindfulness, the circumstantial, the physical, the interpersonal, and the mental, into the conventional path of love and release, where it is love that is emphasized. This is known by many terms. In Tibet, this is known as Tokal's leap over jealousy and pride. Please chant with me. May all minds of all beings now be as in law. Oopsie, look at this. Here we go. Let's make this. Okay, and here we go. Oh, how nice. Okay. May all minds of all beings now be as peacefully enlightened as the mind of a real or imagined Buddha symbolized by a tikle one suitable seed or bija mantra. Notice we're working with figures of speech and not saying that everybody is already enlightened and everybody's mind is already a Buddha's mind. We're just playing with figures of speech. We're staying firmly grounded in reality. So we're taking all these words and we're squeezing them down into 6 syllables, which we're dividing between our inhalation and our exhalation. Now we're taking those same 6 words and we're silently and mentally reciting them during our inhalation. During our exhalation, we are physically relaxing as best we can as we strive to chant this 6-syllable mantra 8 times per breath. Please, if this is your first time joining me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om mani mimi yung, 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 om mani mimi yung. Cool. So, look like a bunny. Please chant with me. May all relationships, all speech of all beings now be as joyfully loving as a real or imagined Buddha's communication symbolized by the 6-syllable mantra. And again, we're taking all these words and squeezing them down into 6 syllables. Om mani mimi yung, 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 om mani mimi yung. Please chant with me. Oops, one moment. Oh, that'll work. May all bodies or forms of all beings now enjoy the beautiful health seen in Buddhist statuary, depicting the blissful body of a real or imagined Yadaman archetype of enlightenment such as Chenrezig. Notice we're using Chenrezig not as an entity worthy of worship or supplication, but as an archetype, helping us to whose iconography helps us to bring the 4 bases of mindfulness into the path of love and letting go. Om mani mimi yung, 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 om mani mimi yung. May all circumstances... Oopsie, one moment. May all circumstances or lots of all beings know how the good fortune or boon, as a Buddha's real or imagined paradise, pure land or Vati. Om Mani Mimi Yung, 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 Om Mani Mimi Yung. So, having trained in love, having exercised the neural pathways that are empathetic and already factory installed, together as a team, let us meditate as transformative. As together we prepare for our next set of contemplations. Or at least we try to, if I can push the right button in the right sequence. There we go. Let's see, what do we have here? Fabulous. Okay, I'm going to remove this line because that's how I roll. And I'm going to hit this button here. Let's see if that works out okay. All right. Let's see if that fits on the screen better. Okay. So let us view letting go through a philosophical lens as we bring the illusion of horizontal duality of us and them into the dance of impermanence and interdependence known as Madhyamaka's Yoga of Inconceivability. And it's also Tokal's opportunity to leap over pride. So rather than indulge our controlling tendencies with the follies of active visualization, emotion, magic, and belief, we could just recite these wise words in harmony with our breathing and allow our subconscious to do the heavy lifting. Let us sidestep the rigidity that confuses metaphors for statements literal and relax into the flexibility that savors the chance, explaining metaphors as similes. Together, let's chant. All visible circumstances or lots could be as impermanent and interdependent, as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this body or form. Please notice how we're using melt as the verb melt as a metaphor of impermanence, and the verb absorb as a metaphor of interdependence. Please also notice that instead of using a hard verb phrase such as is, we're using a soft verb phrase such as could be. Also notice that we are playing with the idea of all circumstances melting into our body, which is using the self-centered notion, using self-centeredness to transcend self-centeredness in the tradition of fighting fire with fire. Again, we're going to take all these words and reduce them down to 6 syllables. Having some trouble here, so let's see if I can't cut this and delete that. Push this back. Well, that is have to be a puzzle for another time. Oh, money me me oh 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 money me me oh. Let's do this and see if that doesn't help. Nope, it didn't help. Okay. All sensual bodies or forms could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this communication or speech. Oh, money me me oh 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 money me me all resounding interpersonal speech could be as impermanent and interdependent as if it could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into this awareness or mind. Oh, money me me oh 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 money me me all lucid minds could be as impermanent and interdependent as if they could blissfully melt into rainbow light that could delightfully absorb into a vacuum void, like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which although tantalizing to the eye could be not graspable to the hand. Oh, money me me oh 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 money me me And at long last, let us now bring whatever we spontaneously notice into the path of awareness and release. Sitting comfortably and sustainably as we inhale, while we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this. We can watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. So another quick edit, because that's how I roll. Let's see how this fits on the screen. Oh, that works good. So let us seal this morning's practice by chanting loving wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as peacefully enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by your unsearchable vision. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void no be as joyfully loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void no be as beautifully healthy as a yet Dhamma type depicted in Buddha statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void no be as safely fortunate as a pure land of law depicted in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 9.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the force be with you always.